Betting on myself was the best decision I ever did. And it was something I've never done before because I didn't think I deserved it. I thought I was a guy that was just going to live paycheck to paycheck, struggle like the majority of people. We get in this mindset of the rat race, so to speak. And when I decided to get out of that race and build my own empire, that's when things became very powerful for me.
Hello, I'm Peyton Squires, and I'm the host of the podcast. This podcast is for those who are dissatisfied with where they are at in their life and career currently. I used to be one. When I got out of college with my master's degree, I started working in banking. I eventually moved to a Fortune 500 company. I quickly found out being an employee was not for me. I was bored out of my mind and did not like it whatsoever. Something eventually lit a fire under me. I started studying for the CPA exam, listening to podcasts, and reading books every day. By doing that, I had passed all 4 parts of the CPA exam in 8 months and quit my job. I opened up my own tax firm, having never been paid to do someone's taxes before. That was in 2014. Since then, I've consistently grown my business, had a lot of success in other business ventures, including real estate, property management, among other things. And now I'm looking for a new venture. I want to help inspire you and other entrepreneurs to achieve their potentials and dreams, as well as learn from the stories of these entrepreneurs as to see what has gone well and what hasn't gone well for them. Let's go create a bunch of healthy, wealthy, and wise entrepreneurs. Hello, listeners. Welcome back to Behind Their Success podcast. I am Peyton Squires, the host, and today we got a special guest on for you, Gary Curley. So Gary was born and raised in the Kansas City area where he met and married his high school sweetheart, Crystal. They couldn't ask for a better place to live and raise their 2 children, Addison and Chase. So Gary previously served for 15 years in law enforcement at the Grandview Police Department. The majority of those years were spent serving the community as a crimes against children detective. He also served in many other roles in the department, such as a hostage negotiator. Gary was recognized and awarded as Officer of the Year in 2017. Seeing a need in the community and having a strong passion to serve, Gary founded a nonprofit called Lizzie's Hope in 2010 to help victims of child abuse and neglect. Gary's taken all the tools, experience, and passion from his previous career and implemented it into helping his clients buy and sell homes. And not only does he help his clients buy and sell homes, Gary, we started as a realtor in 2016. By 2020, he was the number 2 realtor in the state for REMAX. So Gary went from a long-term law enforcement officer to just in a few years being one of the highest producing real estate agents in the state of Missouri. And I know in 2023, he also finished as the number 2 realtor in the state of Missouri for REMAX. Gary's motto, outside being the hardcore realtor, is that nobody will outwork him. Gary, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thank you. And not to brag, but my first full year in real estate, I became the number 2 realtor in the entire state out of all the brokerages. So I did both of them for a couple of years before I jumped in full time.
Dude, that's impressive. That's impressive. So Gary, you know, I kind of had your bio there. You worked in law enforcement and been killing it in real estate the last few years. Give us a little more detail on your background or how that all came about.
Growing up, I really didn't want to do anything other than be a police officer. And, so that was kind of like my journey. I never had my mind on anything else. I never really personally wanted to go to college. I had that opportunity to go to college and play baseball, and I just got burned out on that growing up. And like the typical entrepreneur story, that grew up humble beginnings, not in the greatest area, grew up fighting as a sport almost. That not a lot to do where we were at, didn't have a lot. I'm sure my parents were probably doing the best they could at that time. We moved out of that area and into a little bit better area, and somebody got out of prison, started dealing drugs around the neighborhood. And I was kind of the kid growing up that nobody was allowed to hang out with. I was a troublemaker. I was a guy that got in a lot of fights. Then this guy moved in the area and took over that crown and started dealing narcotics in the subdivision. And man, I just made the decision at that time, like, hey, I want to be a law enforcement officer. This is not the path for me. And I seen how those drugs had ruined so many people's lives. So it just kind of, I doubled down on being a police officer. And when I was 20 years old, I just joined the academy and got on at Grandview, a little local community just south of Kansas City. They don't have a lot of resources, so it was kind of a double-edged sword. Got a lot of experience really fast. I served as a patrolman for a couple of years. I never thought I'd ever actually want to be a detective because I just loved being behind the wheel, chasing bad guys, getting into foot chases. I've always kind of prided myself in being the hardest working person around. I was never the smartest guy. I never thought I'd ever be really successful. So I thought the only thing I can really control is how hard I work. And so they came to me, asked me if I wanted to become a detective. And I was like, maybe just to become a better patrol officer. Then, I transferred to the detective unit after a couple of years, worked a couple of years in burglary. And then you realize that, unfortunately, nobody really gets in trouble for breaking into houses. It's almost like shoplifting in our county, which is a whole other topic. I transferred to crimes against children because I just felt led to go there. And I did that for 12 years and, served as a hostage negotiator. And I learned a lot on how to communicate with people, which is my superpower. I was diagnosed actually at a younger age with social anxiety disorder. And, so to be able to do what I do, I have to really leverage my strengths. And also growing up, I was actually paralyzed for a year at Guillain-Barré. And so that's going is a little fun fact that a lot of people don't know. So I have overcome a lot, learned how to walk again, get dressed again, and kind of led me into law enforcement and served, just under 15 years there.
It's kind of a sensitive topic, but what led you into the crimes against children unit? Now, I can't even imagine what you experienced and saw in your role there.
I just felt like I needed to do something more important. It was actually kind of my demise. After a while, I never thought I'd do anything else but be a police officer, be a detective. But, actually doing that for so long, it kind of broke me. And I couldn't see another way. My department actually, wouldn't transfer me out at the time. And so that's actually, oddly enough, led me into real estate. So
yeah, hard work, right? So, and I like what you said there, that that's the one thing you can't control, right? You can't necessarily control your IQ or the circumstances around you or all these different things. You can make up for all those things in just pure hard work.
Yeah, it's true. When they say like hard work beats talent every day, and then it gives you time for your talent and your skills to catch up. And I'm really big on self-growth. At this point in my life, I wish I would have understood that a little bit sooner, but I guess, we're never too late. So,
yeah. So served 15 years as an officer, transitioned into real estate. So tell us about how that started and how it's been going.
Yeah. So it is going pretty well. When I did break from being a crimes against children's detective, it just kind of went to my department leaders and told them I needed a break, needed a transfer. And they were like, nope, you're really good at this. And we don't want to imagine how many bad guys would walk free if you didn't do this role. Well, at that point I had kids, and it was really hard to juggle the emotional strain of that, working, probably 70 hours, sometimes 80 hours a week as a detective. I actually by accident ended up having a conversation with a guy at my daughter's basketball practice. And at that point in my life, I would say I was probably the most toxic individual I've ever been around. I was unhappy. I was sick of being around myself. I couldn't imagine the poor people that had to sit around me or listen to me all the time. And, this guy's like, have you ever thought about becoming a real estate agent? And I was like, at that point, man, I didn't know anything about business. It was kind of seemed so far fetched, I never imagined doing anything else. And it's funny how we get into our own bubbles and you get tunnel vision and you don't even realize there's other jobs out there or other opportunities. I was always just kind of told, like, in a kind of thought that you're just a cop and what else can I do? I've only been a cop since I was 20 years old, and I had no other skills, I thought, until I got into real estate. So I took my exam and my test a couple months later and kind of started my real estate career. I juggled both of them for a couple of years. I was really just thinking as a side job, if I could just sell maybe 1 to 2 houses a year, then I don't have to work off duty security anymore, because twice a week I would work in an apartment complex, the worst apartment complex in the city. And foot chases, just, I mean, every single night it was something, which is why they hired police officers to work security there. And my first 2 days of having my license, I got a home under contract. And then the first year I sold 51 houses. And
Jeez.
so, I made probably 3, 4 times my income just kind of doing it part time, although the average realtor sells 8 houses a year, full time realtors, and I sold 51, kind of doing it on the side. But I was probably putting in full time hours. At that point, I was probably working 80 plus hours between both jobs, just trying to keep up and hustle. But the harder I work, the more it fuels me. And I've always kind of been that way. And real estate's one of those careers where you're rewarded for how hard you're working and what you put into
Yep.
it. Where in law enforcement, it's actually the opposite, unfortunately, and this day and age and this culture, things that I used to get accommodations and awards for, where now you get reprimanded for. The harder you work, the more trouble you get in, the more paperwork you create. And I knew it was time when my city leaders, my department leaders just told me, like, can't you just look busy? Can't you just shuffle papers? And that's not me. And I'm 10x all the way, 110 miles an hour. And once they kind of told me that, I knew it was kind of the beginning of the end. Needed to get out.
Yeah, a comment like that's got to be pretty. I just knowing you as well as I do, that comment like that, and for anybody, I can't imagine that just shuts them down. A person that cares so much, and to get a comment like that of just like, "Hey, don't buck the system, don't cause any problems." That's the only thing that's going to do is shut you down.
Yeah. And I realize I've never been the easiest person to lead. I've never been a yes or no, sir kind of person. I will challenge you. I will question you. If I don't feel an order or decision is just, I won't do it. And
Okay.
I've always been that way. It's just knowing now the culture index, my personality. It really fits. It's like not necessarily a rule follower.
What's your personality again? What's your
I'm
profile?
a philosopher, but I'm a high drive philosopher. So it's kind of
Really low C, right?
yeah. Yeah. So I don't, follow orders very well, which is why, and I think you too, like it's hard for me to work well with authority and leadership. And being in a leadership position now, it does give me a little bit more understanding of some of my past leaders and some of my current leaders. But that doesn't mean that I still don't buck the system from time to time. But it was a hard choice when I left. It was actually the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. It was the
Wow.
scariest thing I've ever done. I remember the last day of being on the department, me and another guy arrested a homicide suspect on our last homicide. And man, I went and cuffed him to the bench and I drove home and I cried all the way home thinking, because you start listening to all the naysayers throughout your, career of like, you're just a cop. What are you going to do when the market crashes? How are you going to give up your benefits and your pay and your security of your job? And so that, started sinking in on the drive home, like all at once. It's like maybe I didn't think of it before. And man,
Yeah.
I broke down and I was like, man, I'm going to have to call them back and just beg for my job back. And then the very next month, I actually made double my income what I've made in a year at the police department. So, I made 50,000 on a good year, and that's with fortunately a lot of overtime. And my very first month being away full time, I made 100,000. And I knew I just bought myself 2 years. And so in my
Yeah.
mind, that's what I did was I was buying myself years of if it didn't work out, at least I have a year, 2 years to make up and to
Yeah.
figure my life out. And then the second month, I hit another 100, and it just snowballed from there. And I'm pretty grateful.
So there's probably listeners hearing that and jaws on the floor of, hey, he quit his job and then in a couple months made twice of what he did the year before, brand new in an industry. Like, how'd that happen?
So the funny story is my partner in the detective unit was looking to sell his home during me going through real estate school. And the whole time he was like, hey, do you want to sell my house? Stuff like that. And that was kind of the plan. And I thought I made it. I was like, man, I'm
Yeah.
going to get my first sell pretty quick. It was a nice home here in our city of Lee Summit. Then we're doing, I believe it was homicide. We're doing a surveillance on a homicide. And he loves when I tell this story, but he looks at me and he's like, this may be awkward, but we hired somebody else to sell her home. And, there was some
That'd
other
be
reasons.
frustrating, right?
Oh man, dude, it was like a stab in my heart. I didn't understand it at the time. It rocked me. And I was like, man, this guy that trusts me with his life doesn't trust me with his house. But, you know, I understand at this point because at that point, man, I've never sold a house. I really didn't. I didn't have a clue what I was doing. Barely passed my real estate exam, and I probably barely passed that. It was tough. Well, at that point, I had to kind of look kind of at the whole picture. And I was like, man, everybody I know, my whole sphere of influence, family, friends, colleagues, strangers, they know me as Gary the detective. And they know me, or they know me as Gary, the guy that owns a nonprofit. They didn't know me as Gary the realtor. They had no idea who that was. And I didn't know who that was at the time. And so when I realized though, is I needed to find a new way to generate leads. And so what I did is I started buying friends and I started buying leads. And there's some people in the industry that frown on buying leads, but this is my take is everybody buys business. You either are buying it with your time or you're buying it with your money. I
Sure.
can't get any time back, but I can always make more money. So I started buying leads, and the first lead I got was on a Friday, and met my first client on a Sunday and got a house under contract, closed 2 weeks later, and got
Yeah.
literally my first commission check was an entire year's worth of overtime at the police department. And
Wow.
I was hooked at that
Look
point.
at that.
And I was hooked. I was like, wow, like, I just hit my goal of selling one house a year. To kind of go back to my partner, I ended up earning his business later on, but I had to earn it, and
Sure.
that's the way it really should be is when people call me now and they're like, oh, my brother is a realtor, my sister is a realtor, so and so. But I was like, man, but do they know what they're doing? Are they a top producing realtor that can really help you and get you the most money for your home or help maybe navigate buying a home? And at that time, like, my friend knew that and my partner knew that, but it lit a fire under me. And maybe without that, maybe I wouldn't be where I'm at. And now that friend is actually my director of operations for
Oh,
my
that's
business.
nice.
So it worked out. And, now he trusts me to lead this business and help support him and his family.
Yeah, that was interesting. You kind of made the comment earlier of everybody do you as Gary the cop or Gary, that has a nonprofit, Gary the detective. And they didn't have that new identity of Gary the realtor. This is something I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs about, but tell them that like when you're starting out, your biggest problem is that nobody knows who you are. And that is the number one problem you have to solve is that you're right. Like you become a realtor and Gary, you think people know you're a realtor, but they don't, right? Like they don't associate you as the realtor.
Yeah.
And getting that word out and breaking through, that's tough. It often takes time, and that's why you really see businesses take most of the time, even 3 years of hard work before that network really starts to build. It's important to get that identity shift and get that out to everybody.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I had to develop a brand, and the hardcore realtor brand just kind of happened by accident. And I just kind of ran with it. And now everybody knows me as the hardcore realtor. And it's one of those things that I now take pride in. First, when my title company is the one that kind of started calling me that, I was like, oh, that's kind of corny. But then everybody started calling me the hardcore realtor. And brand identity is so important. And
Very
I
much.
built it on social media. I really did. And I believe I was reading the 10X rule at the time. And, I became a reader once I started on this journey. And it was like double down on social media. And I built my whole identity on Facebook generally is where I'm most known for. And I got a lot of clients. I make a lot of money off Facebook and I connect with people at a little deeper level. And I built my brand, but it did take some time before the colleagues and the friends and everything came around, but I had to prove myself and I was willing to do it. So
Yeah, and that's the thing, and that's something that I would say has led to a certain level of my success is being active on social media. And it's not even about the way I operate on there. It's not even about necessarily directly getting business out of it, but it's building a platform, building an audience, and also it puts you a little bit on a pedestal or brands you as an expertise, right? If you're constantly talking about with you talking about houses, me talking about money and finance and those kinds of things, it really builds you as an authority. And I one of my biggest regrets is I talked about putting more energy into that for years before I finally actually started to do it.
Yeah. No, I coach a lot of realtors and I coach my team, and it's a number one way to generate income. And I learned early on money follows attention. It is really hard for me, having that social anxiety and stuff. But the more I do it, the further I get away from that. And I just kind of go all in on it. But it also humanizes me. I'm not fake on there. I tell the good, bad, ugly. You can tell probably when I'm having a bad day. I don't hide that stuff. I want people to know me for who I am, not just some phony person that's writing my Facebook post with AI or my AI picture or anything like that. It's all me. Like this is the way I look. No AI filters for me,
Yeah.
unfortunately. So
Yeah, the authenticity is what comes through, right? And those are the people that are successful on social media and spreading their brand is they're just themselves. And everybody's searching for something on this world of all this chaos and whatever. Everybody's looking for something that's real and authentic. And it really comes through when someone's doing that.
yeah, definitely. And I learned money follows attention. And I post numerous times when I was running and gunning, but everything I post is very strategic, very tact.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There needs to be a level of intentionality about it. Just sporadically shooting stuff out there isn't necessarily helpful. I mean, it's better than doing nothing. But yeah,
Yeah.
if you can bring out the authenticity and then also be extremely intentional about how you're trying to navigate that combination, of those two can obviously lead to a lot of success.
Yeah. And I've made some mistakes on there. Now I go by a rule is if it's not motivational, if it's not inspirational, if it's not helpful, I don't post it. It's easy to
Yeah.
get wrapped up in that other stuff, the politics of everything. Obviously, I'm a proud American. Like, I know I wouldn't be where I'm at if I didn't live in this country. So it's hard for me sometimes to bite my tongue and scroll and roll. Sometimes scroll and roll, baby. That's my best advice for anybody on social media. And sometimes I'll type some stuff out and I'm like, is it
Nope.
motivational? Is it helpful? Is it inspirational? It is none of those things. So sometimes I think it's a form of therapy for people. But really, man, you're just creating controversy.
Yeah, and like I'm the same way. I've gotten a lot better to where I don't get sucked into that near as much, but there's still times where I post something and then 2 minutes later I'm like, "You know what? I'm just going to go back to delete that." And it's not like it's something crazy controversial whatever. I'm just like it's just not helpful.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's not positive, it's not lifting anybody up. It's
Yeah.
just not helpful.
And I would say the more successful you are, the more you separate yourself from that stuff anyways. It's like, here's me, my legacy, my journey, and then there's everything else. The other stuff's noise. It doesn't directly impact me. I'm not changing anybody's mind. Nobody is changing anybody's mind on Facebook. Like it's already a bunch of people that are dead hard set on their views and no matter what I say. And as long as we respect each other as humans, and that's the biggest thing for me is I got people from all sides and all walks of life I'm friends with, and I respect them. And as long as we can stay on that level, we're going to be okay.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. As long as you're a good human, I can respect what you believe.
Yeah.
Everybody comes from different perspectives and brings different things to the table. And, I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
So, Gary, what would you say is the best decision you ever made on your journey here?
Oh, man. Obviously, the best decision I ever made was betting on myself. I jumped, and it was the scariest thing that I've ever done. But if I didn't, I don't know if I'd still be here to talk about it. You just never know what life leads. But I was pretty broken at that point, and jumping just into the journey of not even real estate, like just jumping into anything. So, anybody that is thinking about trying something new and it scares you, man, that's what you should be doing. And I was comfortable doing what I was doing as a lead detective, lead interrogator. It could have been easy for me to write out my career, I guess, but gosh, what quality of life would that have been? And I still miss my career sometimes. I got a lot of anger and resentment sometimes, but the time does heal some of that and the further I get away from it. But just betting on myself was the best decision I ever did. And it was something I've never done before because I didn't think I deserved it. I thought I was a guy that was just going to live paycheck to paycheck, struggle like the majority of people. We get in this mindset of the rat race, so to speak. And when I decided to get out of that race and build my own empire, that's when things became very powerful for me.
Yeah. And you talk about the fear there. Like, if you're scared of something, that's probably the direction you should move. And that's so true. And the crazy thing about that, if you never turn and face that fear, it will follow you everywhere you go. And you will always have to think about it. It's never going away until you turn and face that and deal with it in some fashion.
Yeah. And I think everybody's wired a little differently. Like people, we have the fight. Everybody's heard of fight or flight, but there's also fight, flight, or freeze. I've always been a fighter, so I run towards the fight. So maybe it was a little easier for me, I guess. But also, I'm very loyal, very agreeable. So it's hard for me. I hate change. So I had to absolutely be on my last straw before I did make a change, or I would have left. I would have worked both jobs for 20 more years and probably been miserable doing it at the expense of my family. But now that I have the freedom of my time, because like I said before, we can't buy any more of that. So freedom of my time and not getting called out during the middle of my kids' sporting events while I'm coaching, not getting called at 3 a.m. to come out and work crime scenes, opened up a whole realm of possibilities. And I know we still need those people. And I highly respect anybody that is in law enforcement and still continues. But my message to them is don't get stuck. You have choices because you are, a police officer. You actually have a lot of skills you don't even know about. And you can put those into business or do anything you want to do. So don't ever feel stuck.
So Gary, going back to the beginning, if you could go back and give yourself one piece of advice from your perspective today, what would that be?
Read. Before I got my own business in real estate, and I probably only read a couple books my whole life. I was never much of a reader in school. I was definitely no scholar by any means. I was pretty much just at school to play sports. That was pretty much it. And I didn't take advantage, and not that I believe the public school system could have taught me anything, because I'm not a huge proponent of our school system, but I wish that I had somebody in my life that would have mentored me, or I would have had just the kick in the butt that I needed to be on this journey of self-growth and self-development. I wish I would have been able to start reading some of those books, because man, the amount of information I've learned since 2016, every book I open propels me and changes the trajectory of my business and my life at home, family, and business. So
yeah, that's so important. And that's been such a huge, huge thing in my life is reading. And it's amazing. Like, you're just one good idea away from completely changing your life. And you never know what book that's going to be in. Just constantly being in a state of trying to figure things out, trying to work on yourself, trying to develop. It's amazing how quick that stuff can stack up.
yeah, anytime I would have some of the hardest decisions I've ever made, I would open up some of the books that I've read and take massive action, take risks, do it, figure it out later. Maybe if I didn't read those books, maybe I would still be in my office at the police department struggling and broke.
And you probably would be without those ideas.
Yeah,
right?
And there was just 3 words that resonated with me that hit me early on. I was actually running on the treadmill on mile 10. And believe it or not, I used to be a runner. And 3 words just hit me. And why not me? And I saw all these successful people in these books and on Facebook, on TikTok. And I was like, why not me? Like, why do I not deserve that? And so those words have always stuck with me. And I actually wear it around my wrist just to remind myself, why not me? And anytime that I don't believe in myself, or I have something that I don't think I can do, I'm just like, man, why not me? And I gun it, I hit the gas, and it all works out. So
that's some powerful stuff, Gary. That's some really good stuff, man. What's the best way people can connect with you, Gary? Connect with you on social media, or what's the best way people like what they hear and want to connect with you?
Yeah. So, I mean, Facebook is probably where I do most of my interactions, and I'm just listed under Gary Curley there. I am on Instagram, and honestly, Facebook is kind of my platform. I think I'm getting at that age. That's just where my circle is.
We're us old people.
Yeah, it's for us old people, which I never thought I'd get there, because I always say I'm 21 in my soul. But then I realize when I try to run again or work out. I'm not 21. So Facebook's probably the best way. And I love to communicate with people via social media and definitely reach out. And if anybody's thinking about on that drive into work on Monday morning and they feel sick, that is a hint. I did that for way too many years and it almost destroyed me. So on that drive, if you dread Monday morning, you need a change. So get in contact with me. Don't have to be real estate, but I can definitely help you, give you some advice on some of the steps I took to change my situation. And, but man, you got to be sick of being sick and tired. Now it's like, I don't care if it's Monday, every day is my day. I get to win that day. So it fuels me that I wake up because every time that sun comes up, it's another opportunity to get better. You know?
Awesome, Gary. Man, I appreciate you coming on the podcast. Anybody in the Kansas City area, for sure, check out Gary and his team when it comes to real estate stuff. They're amazing. They absolutely outwork, outserve anybody in the industry. So check those guys out. Gary, man, I appreciate you coming on today.
Hey, thank you. Service over sales always.
Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. If you found it valuable, please rate, review, and share it. That is the best way to help us build this and reach more people, as we're trying to accomplish our goal of help creating more healthy, wealthy, and wise entrepreneurs. You can follow us on social media by searching for me, Peyton Squires, or going to PeytonSquires.com. On the website and social media, we're always sharing tips of personal growth, and there we can actually interact. I'm looking forward to it. Thanks, guys.